Today I will be discussing the prologue and the opening scene more generally of Aristophanes' Lysistrata. The prologue is particularly important as it sets up the comic narrative of the play. This consists of the state of affairs, which in this case includes introducing the crisis of the long-drawn Peloponnesian War, which had been going on for 20 years in Athens at this point, but also the two-part plan, which complete the comic idea of how to deal with the problem. This introduction of the state of affairs and the comic idea are standard elements of comic opening scenes. The plan firstly consisted of the occupation of the Athenian Acropolis, as an attempt to restrict access to funds for the Peloponnesian War. The second part of the plan was the sex strike, which hoped to further bring about an end to violent conflict. Throughout the video, I hope to touch upon several key topics and themes from the play that align with the OCR A-level specification for Greek theatre, as is listed here, with a particular emphasis on the ways in which space and performativity created meaning. As we will see, Aristophanes' thinking around the performative dimension of a play, notably through the stage building, the skene, holds a central role in weaving together the main themes and ideas outlined in the A-level spec, and is a vital way in which the play can be discussed. So at the start of the Lysistrata, we see an unoccupied stage with just a skene in sight. And before diving into the rest of the prologue for the play, I think it's important to discuss this structure. The skene was a building in the background of the theatre space, and it had enormous theatrical significance beyond its sometimes claimed purely practical function as a space in which the actors could get changed. Although in the opening scene of most Greek comedies, it often didn't represent anything in particular, just an inside space that lingered in the background, upon the entry of the chorus, it gains its identification, as can be seen in the Lysistrata, when it comes to symbolise the opening to the Propylaea of the Acropolis, the treasury, of which the women would then go on to occupy. This entry of the chorus is one of the most fundamental moments in any Greek comedy for this reason, and the prologue is very important in setting it up. As Lysistrata and Kalanice emerge from the Aesodoi, that is the side entrances onto stage, the theatre space in the middle represents an Athenian side street. Yet even within this generic setting, as the two characters converse about their domestic duties, the greater symbolic associations that can be made with the interior space of the skene are started to be hinted at. The relation of staging and the prominent themes of the play can be explored from line 15, where Kalanice lists the domestic duties of ancient Greek women to Lysistrata, as they're both standing in the Athenian side streets. You know, it's a lot of trouble for wives to get out of the house. We're giving hubby a hand, or waking up a slave, or putting a baby to bed, or bathing it, or feeding it a snack. The roles and work of women are all related back to the household of the oikos, and this is reflective of their social status in Athenian society. This would have been further reinforced by the interior space of the building in the background, the skene, which would have signified their socially designated space as the domesticated oikos. Although this can be said to only be a subtle implication, this staging of the scene does give us a glimpse of the enormous importance that space plays in the visual performance of the play. Upon the entry of the chorus, following the prologue, the skene would have acquired its identification as an entrance to the Acropolis which housed the treasury. This is the space that the women occupy, transforming a public male-dominated sphere into a domestic feminine one in their bid to try and end the Peloponnesian War. The skene in spatial imagery as a whole would have been key to the visual symbolisms of female occupation of male space on stage to an Athenian audience. The continued relevance of on-stage physical performance can also be seen through the use of props. So to continue on in the play, after the female conspirators enter onto stage and Lysistrata announces her plan of a sex strike, despite an initial reluctance in the women, they're quickly won over, and Lysistrata has them swear a ritual oath of chastity. It is at this point that a Scythian girl brings out the two props of a shield and a wine vessel. The props are thought to have been presented on a central stone altar on stage during the original performance of the comedy, which would have acted as a visual reinforcement of the oath to the audience. The shield prop is a nod to a blood oath made in Aeschylus' tragedy, Seven Against Thebes, from which we have a quote. 7 men, bold leaders of a company, slaughtered a bull, let its blood run into a black-rimmed shield. and touching a bull's blood with their hands swore an oath by Ares, Enyo, and blood-loving Terra that they would either bring destruction on the city, sacking the town of the Cadmeans by force, or perish and mix their blood into the soil of this land. This would have been reflective of a wider trend in Greek comedy, of making reference to the very masculine themes of war in tragedy. Through the oath of the women, Aristophanes parodies and pokes fun at Aeschylus, inverting the male-dominated genre of tragedy through his feminine comedy of the women of the Lysistrata. Their ritual is a reverse of Aeschylus's, as it involves women and not men, intends to end the war, whereas in Aeschylus the oath vows to wage war, and chooses to sacrifice wine as opposed to the usual animal sacrifice performed in Seven Against Thebes. Furthermore, the choice of the women to sacrifice wine as opposed to the animal sacrifice is of course a nod to an ancient Greek stereotype of women being drunkards. This stereotype is further emphasised by the comically oversized vessel that the Sisyphean girl returns with, likely dwarfing her in size. Calanice draws attention to this, excitedly exclaiming, "Just touching this could make a person merry." This playful parody can be seen as a trope in comedy, of pushing back against the artistic and moralistic superiority that tragedy is associated with in contrast to comedy. The two physical props of a shield and wine vessel that would have been clearly visible on a central altar embody the key tensions and clashes that occur throughout the play. The opposition of women versus men, and also comedy versus tragedy. So for more insight into the reception of Aeschylus' Oresteia and the Lysistrata more widely, Dr. Piccola has made a video which you can watch. Following this ritual sacrifice, all the women exit through the door of the Skene, and in the following parados scene, the two choruses of the elderly men and the elderly women enter onto stage. It is from this point onwards that the Skene building represents the entrance to the Acropolis and the Athenian treasury. The women can now be said to be running the religious and economic centre of the polis, in a way transforming it into a domesticated oikos or household. In the theatrical stage space in front of the Skene, the siege narrative of the play can now commence, as the men attempt to regain control of this female-occupied sphere. This staging also acts as a symbolic parallel for the women's sexual strike plan, as can be seen in this image, as just as the men attempt in vain to penetrate the interior space of the Acropolis, in the sex strike, the women deny the men sexual satisfaction through resisting access to their bodies. Aristophanes, through his staging of theatrical space, unites his dual narratives, providing the framework for the rest of the performance. Again, in Dr. Piccola's video, you can see how the seemingly two parts of a women's plan are in fact two sides of one united plan, and that is preventing the men's access to wealth, i.e. of the treasury and of the female body. So just as a quick recap on how this all relates back to the A-level syllabus, here's a little checklist. So the uses of visual performance by Aristophanes highlight the importance of the prologue, the Lysistrata, in setting up the narrative and plot structure of the play. The playwright manipulates the space of the stage through the Skene and on-stage props, introducing the central themes and tensions of the Lysistrata and the genre of comedy as a whole, especially its identity in relation to tragedy. Through the staging of theatrical space, he illustrates how the Skene can be a rich source of meaning, on a literal level, representing the Acropolis which the women protect under siege, but also on a symbolic level, representing an internal space where the penetration of men is resisted. Whilst also, the ritual props of the wine vessel and shield provide several insights into ancient religious beliefs and concepts, the stereotypical social differences between men and women, and also how Aristophanes parallels this opposition through the parody of Aeschylus' tragedies, which of course relates back to the representation and satire of tragedy. Spatial and visual performance must enable us to explore the dramatic devices and techniques employed by Aristophanes. So yeah, thanks for watching, and ultimately I hope this video can help in highlighting the ways in which the physical performance of Greek theatre can be approached as a fundamental way in which meanings are shaped by Aristophanes, and dissuades you from approaching Greek theatre from a purely textual perspective.